Paul, for a painfully exaggerated introduction. But yeah, I think the first thing should be the event, thanks to Andrei and Paul, it's such a unique happening. Not only because it might be the last time it happens, but just because it's so rare, a congregation of 4 poets who have influenced so many generations and are coming here tonight. So I think a round of applause for Paul immediately for what he's done. He's worked tirelessly. I'm not going to over-introduce the poets for fear of either understatement or waffling, but I would say that I think their influence has been genuinely profound on my generation and every generation previous up into the 60s when they all kind of made their mark on the poetry world. So the reading order tonight will be Gunnar Harding, followed by Anselm Hollo, followed by Tom Raworth, and finishing with Andrei Codrescu. And there's going to be a short Q&A. Gunnar started writing in the 60s, coming from a background in jazz and art, and really has been the example in Scandinavian poetics which has allowed for the growth away from just a purely nature-based poetics since the 60s. And he really revolutionised the way the Beats did in America, what poets could do in Sweden and Norway and Denmark. So it's a great honour and a privilege to introduce Gunnar Harding to open this evening's reading.
Thanks. Thank you. I will read my poems in English or something similar to it. Anyway, I think you will understand more of it anyway than if I read them in Swedish. Last time I read in England was 4 years ago at the Ledbury Poetry Festival, and before leaving I asked my now ex-girlfriend, I read them to her because she's very fluent in English, and then she said, well, Gunnar, it's not just your Swedish accent, it's also, you have a kind of mid-Atlantic pronunciation, she said. This is not the reason why she's my ex-girlfriend, though. I will start with an improvisations on some themes by the Brothers Grimm. It's translated by Anselm, Hollo. The Enchanted World of the Fairy Tale. The smallest common denominator is a great sense of loss. Dead deep dashed past. The green hunter loses sight of his quarry. His quarry is what he loses sight of. All he wants is to lose sight of his quarry. The greatest common denominator is a leaf green sense of loss. Of 3 who went out, only 1 ever returned. His success was complete. His reward boundless. The eyeglasses of the less fortunate were never recovered. They are washed by rain after rain. They see ticks drop down on people to inflame their brains with German landscapes. Of 3 who went forth, there always were 2 who never returned. Their defeat was complete, their loss boundless. There are days when the giant won't fall for the ruse, days when no kindly mammals speak to us with human voices. Dead deer dash past. The forest comes alive with whispers, can we go now? But no trail leads out of a leaf green sense of loss. Dopey, the vulnerable dwarf, scrapes his stepmother's fiddle, kisses a coffin of glass. Some years ago I wrote the most egotistical, or what do you say, egocentric poems in contemporary Swedish literature. However, the competition was hard, but I thought I should write a poem on each year of my life. That is the 25 first years. That is the years before I started publishing poetry. And as we are in the horse hospital, I will read a poem about the Swedish army. There are very few poems on the Swedish army. But I'm actually old enough to have been in the mounted cavalry up north in Sweden where there are very few roads, but a lot of pine trees to defend, so we had still cavalry there in 62. We were here to defend this forest and become part of this green that our tents and uniforms clumsily mimicked. The forest would not be fooled. Spruce branches slapped us in the face when we rode past. Tree trunks scraped against our knees. If someone fell out of the saddle, he inevitably landed with his back on a pine root. In the winter, we dressed up as snow. To be invisible and then deadly was the point. To obliterate ourselves so we could later obliterate others. The green forest wouldn't acknowledge us. The white snow did not love us. We were Norrland's last dragoons, dressed in white, snow-blind, camouflaged as snow. We guarded the whiteness we would never be part of in the country from Tavelsjö to Täftebo. These are two little villages up north, and this was translated by Roger Greenwald, who is an American living in Toronto. And now back to Anselm's translations again. Tidewater. Where the alphabet ends, the universe begins, with a formlessness that casts the mind back to the reader, in which the sturdy cart horse still trudges along on its big shoes. Another horse, right? All the words begin with capital letters, as if they were names of people we once knew, or places where we once were and never returned to. Next to each animal, next to each letter, stands an animal. Learn the letter and the animal is yours. You can build a cage for it out of a matchbox with bars of sewing thread. But the rat bites the boy who doesn't want to go to school. The cart horse kicks in. The magpie steals his silver spoon. It is gone forever. But the coffee cups keep reappearing, with their glazed immortelles, slightly precious gold-rimmed images of life, as we'd like to think of it. A cloud of steam rises out of every cup. Above the water, more gigantic clouds rise and become subjects for conversation, or perhaps even conversations themselves, an exchange of thoughts, still so formless that they must be confronted with those of others before they can acquire more precise outlines. Everything comes in as flotsam, jetsam, carried by waves that have beaten against your shores. For so long they have become replicas of your thoughts, pieces of broken coffee cups, magpie feathers, bits of conversation. But all the silver that's left is these reflections on the water. Only 3 letters remain, Y, E, and S. They form the magical word. Pronounce it, and the white suit is yours. You win free admission to the shores of forgetfulness, where you can open up to the most elemental, to look out across the sea, to think without words. And I will end with a longer poem in 3 sections. They always say that something is lost in translation, but I think when I read Anselm's translations that something is also gained. Now and then I thought about translating them back into Swedish to make This poem should be called Autumn Leaves, but another Swedish poet had already used it, so I put the first line as title. Many were here, but they left again. Many were here, but they left again. Only a few extras still stand around, forlorn, in the parking lot. Perhaps they never existed. Yet I know they'll come back one day, just as November always comes back. We know the season, and on into our nostrils rises cold smell of iron, heralding its arrival. Glassy afternoons in vibrating apartments, with mirrors mounted on doors, reflecting themselves and other mirrors beyond them, painted white. A stationary storm. I walk around in there, and the air doesn't hurt me, doesn't move me. It touches but doesn't move me. I stand in there and vibrate, supplicating, stationary, mirrored. Not the prayer, but the wound. Not the wound, but the prayer that yesterday's clowns will return for a special additional performance, so one can find out if their suffering is so heart-rending that it once again causes tears to spatter on the panes and laughter to move in piles of dry leaves, rife with polio. So much brick. I have to smile, so much brick to show what we feel deep down. Then comes this great light from the future, and it is terrifying. The underground carnival continues, a mask of worms with papier-mâché faces. Their smiles are only a row of teeth, rotting seed pods. They live in them. Here there rattles across the ground, under the trees slowly pulling their darkness over themselves. Then the procession gathers, detaches itself and stumps through sleet, tracks and foretells in the snow, in coffee grounds, a future in black and white, with the black slowly devouring the white, until spring comes, or death, with birdsong in the all-white cherry trees. Will we be surprised once again on the outskirts of some divine comedy wherein awkward bliss and bashful ecstasy, even the wingless soar on balmy winds into diaphanous garments? Will in a dance everything fill with grace, feet stride on pavements reborn into a renaissance in which blood rushes through marble veins? All want out into the light. Look at me, so many, but all we can see is the teeming crowd. Here they foregather who will become piles of dead leaves drifting across a cold grey afternoon, a prayer, the teeming of dry leaves. Suddenly they fly up to their branches again, and the trees take a bow. The prompter goes on, whispering unused lines. But it's all over. Everybody has gone home. Everybody but one. He sees the brown leaves rise. He thinks he's dreaming. He is dreaming. But we have forgotten the clowns. It all started with them. But over time, purity of heart has become less significant. They hide in the crowd. They are safe there. Hardly anyone knows what they look like when their tristesse no longer smiles its nosebleed colored smile. When tears have washed away all the grease paint, there remains only an embittered school teacher convulsively clutching the edge of a desk in a dead man's grip. It was all a dream about feelings, amplified to a cock's crow in some broken language. Who is still interested in climbing rung by rung up to a moon made of glass? And yet the procession moves on in the night that lets us see all. They walk their sleep, walk it back here. The sound of tin whistles fills rooms, walk dawns to slake the line, switch off the lamps. The small jar contains the daylight. The large one, all the tears wept on their graves. No wind, but the ashes of an ocean. The question is not where to, but past, and the answers to recognize this ocean in small puddles, and to let it billow in no wind, to chase off the dog that is chewing its own bone, and to wake the sleepwalker on the ever-receding shore of waves of roof tides. Thank you.